Hi, and welcome back to Digital Defense. I am your host, Jordan Robertson, broadcasting to you live from the Bloomberg News Bureau in Washington, D.C. This is the Bloomberg Weekly Cybersecurity and Digital Privacy webcast. For any of you watching, whichever platform you're watching on, whether it's the Bloomberg Terminal, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, or any other platform, this is your weekly cybersecurity and digital privacy show. I'm here to answer any of your questions that you have about those topics, as well as bring you some, hopefully, news you can use about how to secure your digital lives. This week, we wanted to talk about a topic that we're going to be talking about a lot more on the show. It's a really interesting topic. You're going to see a lot more news about it. It's kind of the new big threat that I would really urge you to pay attention to. Regular viewers of this show will know that kind of the whole theory of this show, the whole theme, is that this is not a sky is falling show. This is not kind of henny penny, let's run around with their head like chickens with their heads cut off, because there's so many threats out there in cyberspace. However, there are threats that kind of catch hold among the criminal underworld from time to time that I do think this audience really, really would benefit from learning about. And the topic today is a type of attack called SIM card hijacking. Now, as I go through this, this is an interactive show, so as you're watching, if you have questions or comments, please type them into the comment section wherever you're watching this show. I get a real-time update here on my phone of what you all are interested in talking about, and we'll try to get through as many messages as possible, either about today's topic or any other topic related to cybersecurity and privacy. I've been covering the space for over a decade. Talked to a lot of hackers, talked to a lot of good guys, talked to a lot of bad guys. So hopefully I'm able to answer some of your questions. So just getting to the topic of the day, here's what SIM card hijacking is. There's a reason we're talking about it today, and it's this. It's there was a big arrest that was announced, in Florida. The website Motherboard has been covering a lot of these types of attacks. Krebs on Security is another great resource for it. But here's basically what's happening is, if you followed the cybersecurity space at all, in any way at all over the last few years, what a lot of folks like myself would say is, cybersecurity has come a long way in the last decade. When I started covering this space, there weren't a whole lot of consumer protections regarding your digital privacy. Companies did the best job they thought they needed to, securing their data, but as a consumer, you didn't have a lot of options. Now, you have a lot more options, and the best one, the single best one, is called two-factor authentication, meaning you log into a website, many of us already do this, you get an alert to your phone saying, hey, is this you? Enter this code. It's standard practice, stock kind of advice that I and others have been giving for many years, which is, if you have a sensitive account, enable your two-factor authentication. Typically, that's a text message alert, but for some websites, you can use an app, a dedicated app, to do that authentication. You can get a phone call. There are a few different ways of doing it, but the most common is a text message. Now, the problem with that is this, is that it's better than nothing. So if you're watching this and you don't have two-factor authentication on your accounts, you really should do that now. That's the easiest way to secure your accounts. But here's the problem, is that you've just created another target for a dedicated and motivated hacker to attack. So what's happening is, law enforcement is breaking up these criminal gangs, highly lucrative criminal gangs that are draining bank accounts, or more often, cryptocurrency accounts. So they want, the hack is this, these criminals want access to your bank accounts. Nothing has changed there. The problem from the hacker's perspective is, well, we can't just steal their credentials. We can't just steal a password anymore and log right into the account, because the owner is going to get a text message alert that we're trying to log in, and then we're not going to be able to get in. So what they're doing now is, this is a real conundrum if you're a criminal hacker, because what are you supposed to do? Steal a person's phone physically? They're going to notice. I've got my phone in my hand right now. I would notice if somebody ran off with it. So what they're doing is this. It's very diabolical. It's not actually all that difficult. And what they're doing is they're essentially hijacking your SIM card. Now, your SIM card in this photo here, you can see how small it is. Most of us have dealt with these in one form or another, but not at great depth, right? We get a new phone, we put the SIM card in, we call the cellular provider, they set it up. If you travel internationally, you might get a new SIM card for your travels. Most people's interactions with these things are pretty lightweight. But for hackers, if they can convince, now this is a trick, if they can convince my phone provider to assign my phone number to a different SIM card, one that's not in my phone, but it's in a phone operated and owned by the attacker, they will have a very short window of time, in which what they can do is they can intercept those text messages. They can intercept those two-factor authentication, one-time passwords is what they're called. And again, if my phone suddenly goes dead, I'll know there's something wrong with it. But between the time I can figure that out and get my phone back online, a criminal who is targeting me or is targeting anybody watching the show, will have enough time to log into the bank account, intercept the text message, and drain the funds, send them somewhere else to an account under their control. Or in the case of cryptocurrency, simply send it to a wallet under their control, and then they're gone. This is a really, really insidious type of attack, and we're going to see a lot more of it in the future. Again, the reason being, just having a cell phone does not mean, having a cell phone attached to your sensitive account does not mean it's bulletproof. It just means there's another hoop for hackers to jump through. And, again, that is better than having nothing. It's better than just having a password, which is very easy to crack in many cases. So if you add a cellular device, you're adding a layer of protection, but criminals are getting savvy. And we're not just talking about nation-state adversaries. A very consistent theme of this show is I like to offer advice that I think ordinary users, and I consider myself one, can benefit from when they're using digital technology. And a consistent theme is if the NSA wants into your device, if the Russian government wants into your device, if any nation state wants into your personal devices, there's really not a whole lot you can do except be aware and take some precautions. There are some things you can do that are kind of in the super secret realm. But in general, that's just not going to be feasible for a lot of people. So what you wind up needing is there's cyber criminal gangs who tend to take the lowest hanging fruit. We haven't had to worry about them a lot doing things like SIM card hijacking, but now they've realized their easy access to these online, financial technology accounts, whether it's cryptocurrency or banking accounts that are online, their access has been restricted, so they're resorting to these more extreme measures. And the thing with SIM card hijacking, again, is you might have taken the proactive step that I and others have told you to do, which is set up a text message alert on your sensitive accounts. And so the topic of today's show really is that may still not be enough. And I'm going to go through some options on today's show. And again, we welcome your questions. If you're just joining us, please feel free to write in any questions or comments you have into the comment section, whether you're watching this in the Bloomberg terminal or Facebook or other platforms. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. We're getting some questions coming in already, so thank you for those. We have time for many more. So before I get to some of the tips and tricks that you can utilize to guard against, as best you can, nothing's bulletproof, there's no silver bullet in cybersecurity, but to at least be better aware and better protect yourself against these types of attacks, let me get to some of these questions that are coming in first. First question here is a good one. Some websites are now making two-factor authentication a requirement. What am I supposed to do? Here's the reason I like this question. What I'm saying on this show is not to avoid two-factor authentication. In fact, I and most other security experts are a big proponent of two-factor authentication. There are more secure ways to do two-factor authentication, and there are less secure ways to do it. But in general, if you have a sensitive account, you absolutely should enable two-factor authentication to your account. Now, if it's a really sensitive account, you might want to go beyond the text message alert to your phone. Some banks, some social media companies have dedicated apps that perform the validation for you. So that's an app that exists only on your phone, involving code that is only running on your phone and on the company servers to create one-time passwords that authenticate you and only you to that account. There are other methods as well, but the big takeaway is if you're using a sensitive account, absolutely set up two-factor authentication. If all you're offered is a text message alert to your cell phone, that's not bad. That's actually still really, really good and better than nothing. But now the cybersecurity, as criminal hackers are advancing and getting better at what they do, we as kind of ordinary technology users need to adapt and get better at protecting ourselves as well. And there will never be a silver bullet in cybersecurity. There's always way too much financial motivation, or in the case of nation states, intelligence gathering motivations that make your device just very, very compelling for individuals to hack into. So set up two-factor authentication, but I'll get to some of these tips and tricks now. But there are some things that you can do to protect these accounts. So here's the first thing. If you have a sensitive account, and we got a question here is, what do I mean by sensitive versus very sensitive accounts? Another good question. I would say a sensitive account involves your finances. So whether it's your banking account, whether it's a bank that holds your home mortgage, whether it is your IRA, whether it's your 401k, anything involving your finances, especially cryptocurrencies, especially if you're in the cryptocurrency game, and you're not doing a lot to secure those bitcoins and other digital currencies, you're asking for trouble. We've covered this previously on the show. There are so many ways to get robbed of your digital currencies and have zero recourse. So please, if you're doing cryptocurrencies, that's a topic for a different show. There's a lot of protection you got to put on those things. But those are a sensitive account. Anything financial is a sensitive account. Your email. Your email is absolutely a sensitive account. And a lot of people will tell me, Jordan, what do I care if the Russians want to look at my email? It's ordinary stuff. I'm messaging my wife, or I'm messaging my husband, talking about groceries, or I'm talking about the kids, or whatever. It's really the wrong way to look at it, because I don't think anybody, I don't care who you are, would be comfortable with your email potentially leaking onto the open internet. And that's one of the risks of hackers. I mean, if they get inside your account, they can extort you. Typically, they're just looking for information that will help them make money. But look what happened with Sony, and look what happened during the 2016 election. Information has a lot of value and a lot of power, and especially the more private it is, the more powerful it is. So I would absolutely say the days are long gone when you could kind of get away with the dodge of, well, I'm not that interesting to people. You absolutely are. If you've got a bank account, you've got an email account, you do, if you transact at all financially in the modern kind of e-commerce world, you're absolutely a target. There's money there. There are lines of credit there. So banking, email, those are the big ones. Social media as well, although this is kind of a gray area, because what can be done on social media is if somebody hacks your account, they can hack your friends. They can also do things to kind of diminish your reputation, or give you a bad name, or kind of publish things that might make you look weird. So there's a lot of value there as well, but I would put financial, email, obviously any password type accounts you have, if you have a password manager, those things are very sensitive. And I think ordinary kind of sensitive accounts are, let's say you're logged into a newspaper website, or any other site for, let's say you've got a subscription to your local newspaper and they require a login to access the content. It's somewhat sensitive that it's your password, but unless you have kind of all your financial information stored there for some reason, it's probably just a credit card, which is not actually that big a deal, because you can cancel a credit card and get reimbursed if it's stolen. I would consider that, I wouldn't even consider that really a sensitive account. That's kind of the less sensitive variety. But it's up to you to decide, if somebody broke into my account and drained it, while you're talking to the police and while you're trying to figure out how to get right again, I would deem a very sensitive account any of those accounts that you can't live without. If somebody drains if they drain your 401k and they cash out and they send it to their account, I mean, it's a big deal. So that's kind of how I'd categorize those things. So where do we go from here? We're getting a lot of good questions. I'll get to some more of these in a minute. So thank you for sending those in. So, again, what we're looking at here, and this print will be a little bit too small for you to see, but I wanted to show it to you anyway. Just don't worry about the actual words on this, but this is kind of the life cycle of a digital interaction. You've got the user here, you got the bank on the other side. The bank sends you a text message alert every time you try to log in. Well, what the criminals do, as you see here, they can do a couple of things. They can force you to a fake website, where you enter your real credentials, your real one-time password, and the hackers just enter that onto the real website and act as you. But what we're talking about here, the SIM card swap, for a short period of time, your phone goes dead, you don't get a message, they get the message, they log in, it takes them seconds. They have scripts, they have automated programs to drain the accounts. So it doesn't take long at all. So first tip or trick of the day, if you notice your phone goes dead for no apparent reason, don't ignore it. We've all had problems where our phones have lost reception, or they've gone down from 4 bars to 3 bars or 1 bar. Those are just ordinary parts of dealing with the modern cellular network. If, however, your phone is disabled, it suddenly goes dark, you have no service, don't wait to report that to the cellular company. Call them immediately. That is your single best defense against SIM card swapping. The reason for that is this. SIM card hijacking is not a silent attack. It is an attack that if you're paying attention and you're utilizing your phone, and all of us use it kind of mostly throughout the day, but the moment you notice that your phone has lost its network and has zero, it's just not connected to a network, it just can't connect to the cellular networks. Pay very close attention there, because that could be an instance of SIM card hijacking. Now again, I don't want you to go out and call the cell phone company anytime you lose reception, but if you have no service, if for no other reason, and your phone just kind of goes dead, that could be an example of, or an instance of, a hacker, convincing the phone company, tricking them into moving your number to a different number. And again, you'll get your phone number back. It might not even take that long, but what you're really worried about is that gap. I mean, when a criminal pulls off this attack, when they're bad guy with a hat and the glasses, the standard hacker kind of archetype, they don't need a whole lot of time to do this part right here. They need seconds. They're going to log into a bank account, they're going to run a script, run a program to drain as much money as they can, add their own account, and they're gone. So tip number one, if you notice anything funky or really, really serious about your connection, or it seems like your phone has been removed from the network versus just getting spotty reception, pay attention. That could be a sign of trouble. I've got a few more as well. I'll get to some more of these questions. Thank you for sending these in. Again, this is an interactive show, so anybody with questions or comments, I get a real-time feed of them here, and I try to answer as many of them as I can. The next question here is, are there going to be new two-step authentication technologies coming soon beyond SMS? Another good question. Yes, there already are. A number of sites, Facebook and Google and some banks will use their own applications, or they'll use third-party applications that exist only on your phone. And this is pretty interesting. This is two-factor authentication. And what it does is anybody who's had to use a corporate kind of dongle, or kind of a physical device to log into their computer systems, typically inside large companies, will understand what's happening here. You download an app, and these apps are just Authenticator is one of them. There are others as well. And what happens there is you've got essentially a secure handshake that's been established when you download that app. And what happens is on your phone and on the application, the companies that you're interacting with, there's code running that authenticates only you to that service. And it creates a one-time password. It's either numbers or letters or both. And every 30 seconds or 90 seconds or however long the program is timed to be, you're getting a new one-time password. And that syncs up with the one-time password that exists on your services servers and the service providers' servers. So that's a lot more secure than getting a text message, which, as you can see from this example, can be hijacked and can be redirected. You want to get as close as possible, the bottom line is this, you want to get as close as possible to requiring a hacker to have as close as possible to your physical device. If a hacker has to get your physical device, they're just not going to do it. That's not in the criminal's best interest. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. Now, nation states are a totally different story. If they want your device, they're probably going to get it, and they can get it physically, they can get it digitally, lots of different ways. The criminal hackers that we're talking about who are looking to drain your bank account, if you want to go beyond standard SMS messaging, look at some of these authenticator apps. I'm not in the business on the show of recommending one technology over another. They're all generally pretty good these days when it comes to things like password management or authentication. They're actually pretty basic technologies, but the existence and the proliferation of smartphones has given us kind of a way to carry that technology around. And so I would strongly suggest that. And if the service that you're using offers things like Google, is really advanced at this, at offering even more advanced ways to protect your account, such as, a physical token, like a dongle, You can get third-party technologies that will further help authenticate you to your account. But I also want to make really clear, and I see this happen a lot in the cybersecurity community, the cybersecurity journalism community. You can do all of these things. You can add two-factor authentication on top of two-factor authentication on top of two-factor authentication. And it's all good. It's all things that we should be doing. But the worst thing you can do in security, when thinking about security, is have a false sense of it. So you can do all these things. It definitely helps protect your accounts, but you can't just sit back and say, okay, I'm going to be secure. Because then what's going to happen is there are going to be attacks like these SIM hijacking things that come around, they catch fire, criminals figure out how to do it, they figure out how to do it well, they figure out how to make it a part of their business model. So as funny as it is to think about what they do as a business model, they actually have a very big business model. But you can't get complacent because the criminals are always going to be looking for new ways into basically your accounts. That's what they want. They want into your bank account or your email or whatever. And any sensitive accounts you have are going to be vulnerable. So you got to try to stay one step ahead. And it's not, and it's not always easy. It's not always easy to do and be a defender. And I've got a few more tips and tricks as well. Here's another shot of a SIM card. As you can see, tiny devices, you don't even think of them actually as a security device, and they're not really. All a SIM card does, actually this could be helpful to explain. We actually got a question here as well I'm going to address. It says, can you explain how someone hijacks your SIM card? Absolutely. Explained at the top of the show, but definitely it's worth remembering. So a SIM card is not a security device. All a SIM card does is tell the cellular network that you're hooked up to that you're authorized to make calls and send data. And all it does is authenticate you to the network. It says, yep, this is, person XYZ's phone. This is Jane's phone. This is her number. She's authorized to send messages and data or whatever. So it's actually just a way of bookkeeping, and billing. I mean, that's essentially what this technology does. But now criminals have figured out, well, if I can here's the hack, again, for viewers who have just joined us. Here's the way the hack works. A SIM card, I'll show you another picture, how it looks in relation to a phone. So a SIM card, tiny little chip, essentially that sits in your phone, authenticates you to your cellular network. Doesn't really do a whole lot. It's not that sophisticated. What criminals have figured out to do is, what this SIM card does is it says, Jane Doe at phone number 12345 is authorized to communicate with this network on this device. Criminals have figured out how to trick the phone companies into reassigning your number, what's on the data on your SIM card, to a different SIM card on a phone that they control. So again, the criminal calls up your cellular provider, says, hey, I lost my phone, the SIM card's broken, I got a new one. They have enough information about you, so they know your name, they might know your social security number, they might even know the hardware number of your device. They might have a lot of information about you that can be gleaned from hacks or bought on the dark web, and they call the mobile provider, and some are more susceptible than others to this, but they're all kind of equally at risk, is they'll call up and they'll say, hey, I broke my phone, the SIM card's busted or I lost it, I've got a new phone, new SIM card, can you just move me? Can you port my number to a new device? It's exactly the same thing that you do when you actually do lose your phone or you actually do buy a new one. You call the phone company and say, hey, move me to this new device. What they're doing is they're authorizing your account to a new SIM card. That's essentially what they're doing. And if the problem is, if you don't own that SIM card, if it's a hacker who owns it and it's a phone that they own, again, you're going to see an impact. What you're going to see is you're talking on your phone and then instantly you're not, because your phone has been deactivated from the network. You didn't lose it at all. But if the criminal is successful in convincing and tricking and persuading the mobile phone provider into transferring or porting your information from your SIM card to their SIM card, the clock is ticking. I guess that's the big message of today's show is when that happens, you don't actually have a lot of time. Because if a hacker is going through that level of reconnaissance against you, they already have a lot of information. They will already have information on where you bank and how you log in and, and what your passwords are. They need all of that stuff to make this attack work. Because it's not just enough to get your phone. They're not out kind of joyriding with your phone and making calls here and there. That's not why these attacks are occurring. They're occurring because those criminals have all the information they need to log into your bank account, but they need to steal the one-time password that gets beamed to your phone. So when that happens, they're on it, they move quickly, you may have just minutes, to avoid your account being hacked. And if it does get hacked, it's not the end of the world. You do have to jump through a lot of hoops to prove that you were hacked, and it takes a while to get your money back. So in my view, this is going to be kind of one of the new really big problems that companies are going to face with regard to consumer security. And again, we've had kind of a lull for a while, I would say, because two-factor authentication came along. It's a really great technology. It works for everybody. So there's this kind of false sense of security that kind of comfort level will exist forever, and it just really won't. This is a big new thing we're going to be revisiting on the show a lot, and we're going to be talking about it a lot more. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not actually that complicated. It's just calling up a phone company and tricking them. Before we get to some more questions here, again, we're almost out of time, so thank you for everybody who's written in. My first piece of advice, again, was watch for any abnormal disconnection of your phone from the network. Again, not just reduction in quality or reception, but hey, my phone seems to have been deactivated. It may have been, and it may not have been an accident. So call your cellular provider if you think you see something like that. The second thing is set up a PIN code with your cellular carrier. These are becoming more and more common, but you typically have to ask for them. Some providers will ask you for one, but you typically have to ask for them to be set up. You set up a PIN code or a password or even a voice print some places use. Whatever it is, you want to have something else on that account so that if anybody calls up, it's going to be a lot harder for them to hijack your SIM card or to get your number switched to a different device. Again, that's not foolproof either because that information can be stolen. However, you're a heck of a lot better off if a criminal's able to engineer this attack. They clone your smartphone, they steal your one-time password, what you would like to do, if we back up a second, if they clone your phone, they've got your passwords. When they try to do that step of getting your phone and getting that one-time password, you want them to hit another wall. And you just want to make it as hard as possible for these criminals to do what they're in business of doing, which is accessing personal accounts. So if you've got two-factor authentication on your phone, you've got a hard password, you've got two-factor authentication on your cellular provider's account, that's kind of the best you can do right now. There are apps as well, as we talked about earlier in the show, that can help you with this two-factor authentication. But really, the big lesson of this show, the big takeaway, is that two-factor authentication on its own was pretty good for a while, but you need to take a few more steps if you're going to be really proactive about this. Because also, I should note, the victims of this SIM card hijacking, they're not necessarily just high net worth individuals. These are ordinary people. Because, the theory goes among cyber criminals, the high net worth people, the famous people, they might have more security around. It might be harder to get at their accounts. But, the ordinary, John or Jane Doe that has a few $1,000s in the bank, that's a really juicy target for them as well. That's an easy target. They probably have less security. And if they can steal a few hundred or a few $1,000s here and there, it adds up to big money very quickly. Last question here, and then we are really out of time. Does this affect phones without SIM cards? I like to be real honest with you. When I don't know something, I'm not too familiar with that technology. I'm not too familiar with phones without SIM cards. This is just generally the way phones communicate with cellular networks. So the point here is this: regardless of whatever technology you're using, SIM cards are kind of the threat vector here. The ability for a hacker to call whatever cellular provider you're using and port your number, to a different number. That's the new attack. It's not terribly difficult. So we talk a lot about two-factor authentication. The big lesson of today's show is you might need a second layer of two-factor authentication. So call your cellular company if you're interested in this. Ask them, what protections they have against this practice, and ask them if you can set up a PIN code to your account or a password for your account. So anybody trying to do this to you, it'll just make it that much harder, and they're much more likely to just walk away versus actually getting that next step of taking your money, because nobody wants that to happen. So with that, we are out of time. Thank you so much for writing in, those of you who wrote in. If you have any more questions, I'm on Twitter. It's at JordanR1000, Jordan, the letter R1000. Our website for the global technology team here at Bloomberg, of which I'm a part, is bloomberg.com/technology. We broadcast this show every week. Our usual time is noon Eastern on Thursdays, weekly. So please tune in again if you find the content interesting. And wanted to thank everybody involved, in the production of the show, producer Pia Gadkari, and everybody else that makes the show happen. With that, signing off. We'll see you next week on Digital Defense. Thanks for watching.